Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book from the Legal Action Group, which is the Access to Justice charity. This is a book that I reviewed when it first came out, and much of what I said in the first edition still applies. It's called Adult Social Care Law. It's now in a second edition for 2019. It's been written and brought together by Stephen Knafler, Queen's Counsel, with an impressive group of contributors who I will name because of the huge amount of work involved. The book's there, we'll have a look at it in a minute. The contributors are Tim Baldwin, Leon Glenister, Admas Habteslasie, Desmond Rutledge, Yaaser Vanderman and Galina Ward, and I'd like to thank them very much for the work they've done in this area. It's a difficult area of law. It's an area I practice in, on and off, and as I say, it's not the easiest subject matter at all. The title I've given for the review, I discussed the book with Elizabeth because we looked at this book together for the first edition, and I've given it a title for our current review, one of the most important new volumes from the Legal Action Group on adult social care. Now I say that because I fought some elections last year, and this was at local government level, and it became apparent to me very quickly that the problems of adult social care and the law itself, certainly with regard to local authorities, are widely unknown. And I think it's an area that we need to think of perhaps in a different way in the future. Let's look at the book. It's very heavy. It's a paperback. There it is. You can see the front. Then you can see the spine. And then you can see some quite nice comments on the back. Again, some of them are very important. This book exudes learning based on practical experience in the day-to-day work of a legal practitioner in this field. And then there's another comment. Throughout the book, the fruits of careful editorial decisions shine through and reflect Stephen Knafler's huge expertise in this area. Well, absolutely true, and there's a lot more as well. Now, the book itself is, as I say, very heavy. It's a paperback, so take care with it. There is the index at the back. You can see it's about 1,400 pages long. The index is by paragraph numbering, and as I say, that one of the difficulties, apart from the fact of handling the book because it's so heavy, is they've tried to put as much as possible into the one volume, and I understand why. You can see here that the index starts off there. It's not a big index, but I think it's quite sufficient for what it needs. Now you can see just at the back, this is chapter 31. You see the paragraph numberings at the side, and then there's footnoting, mainly for things like the case reference numbers and so forth. Then at the front we've got information there about the author. Stephen is founder and general editor of Community Care Law Reports, and as I say, the book is also available as an e-book, which I've mentioned in the review. Can I just say that this is community care law that we're talking about here. You can use different terms for it, but that's actually what it is. That's the detail of the actual edition. The first edition came out in 2016, and then this is the second edition. There's an introduction which is well worth reading. What he says, and in fact I've made that point in the review, it's a decent upgrade on the first edition in terms of commentary in cases, and it takes into account developments up to the end of May 2019. And then he says the one thing which is very apparent to me, and I'm sure others, unfortunately adult social care itself hasn't been upgraded, far from it. And I don't think that's usually a problem for the well-off. According to the recent Marmot review, those who live in more affluent areas of England will on average live for 7 years longer and have 17 more years of disability-free life. So he's making a very important point there in terms of social observation, and I will leave it at that because I take the point that is being made. Again, you can see after that he's included the index to the first edition, which sets out, when he said the original plan hatched many years ago was for a simple, straightforward community care case book comprising a themed selection of case summaries from his publication Community Care Law Reports. Well, that was the start, but you see how heavy it's become so quickly, because alas, with the cases I've had, they are growing, and there are reasons. It's called money. That's putting it bluntly. It's called money, but there we go. That's perhaps my rather jaundiced view. I don't know. There's the contents section. You can see how it's structured, the various parts and the chapters, and then there's various information running all the way through to the 31st chapter right at the end on inquests. Then we got the table of cases. You can see how they are structured there. There's a lot of detail with the table of cases running all the way through. A lot of local authorities, of course, involved, and this is very much to do with the state. Then the table of statutes, again, obviously the main Care Act is very, very covered in very great detail. Then after the statutes, you've got statutory instruments after that. Again, a lot of information. Then the treaties and conventions, because again, as with everything today, it's not just one jurisdiction we're talking about a lot of information that must come from other places. Very useful abbreviations, part of the book. It's so easy to forget what an abbreviation stands for, and I do think it's very helpful to have this. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I can't remember half of these. I do remember HMRC, Revenue and Custom, and HMCTS, of course, we all know those. But some of the other ones can sometimes you just scratch your head and think, well, what does that mean? Now, what you've then got, part one, you've got a nice short index to show what's in the part. And then you've got for each chapter, again, another short index. So you should be able to navigate your way through this book very well. There are key points which are emboldened in blocks, again, which is very helpful. Principles and core duties, and of course it looks specifically straight into the Care Act itself. Then English secondary legislation and so on, and Welsh. And then again, strategies, policy and challenges. And it builds up and it goes all the way through like that. You can see the detail of the book. You can see all the case law. So if you are looking for case summaries, which remember is the motivation for what Stephen was really trying to achieve initially, you will have all of that and more. And I think it's quite useful, although I have to say that, like many judges perhaps, I do tend to look very much at individual sets of facts and bear in mind what the actual precedents are. That's going to fall down if I do that. What the precedents are and might be. But at the end of the day, we are looking at very much at the specific facts of a particular problem. And I say that because this is a subject which is going to increase in terms of its visibility legally over the years, especially because of the problems of budgets within local authorities. I think that's partly something that should be stressed for people who are relatively new to this particular area of law. So the second edition of the book, Adult Social Care Law, arrives, I say, at an important time for the subject matter itself. The volume remains, of course, an indispensable single resource from LAG, the Access to Justice charity, and it's basically aimed at all those people who are actually acting as advisors for those needing care and support through what is called in the by the publishers the overlapping web of legislation, guidance and case law that makes up this complex field of adult social care law. And it is complicated, perhaps unnecessarily so, I don't know, but in fact it is complicated, and therefore you do need to have quite a lot of knowledge about how the system works. And I think this book, and I've said it in the review, will be of special assistance to those working in local government where the issues faced are particularly acute in community law itself. And what we get with this updated second edition, of course, includes well over 700 of the most significant domestic and European cases, which form the basis of adult social care law and many other cases which are overlapping in areas such as the National Health Service, mental health issues, housing, welfare benefits and support for asylum seekers and persons from abroad. All of these areas are nicely covered by the legal action group. I'm going to put it like that because it's a very heavy book, 1400 pages, and you can see got a mind of its own. The point I would make is that Legal Action Group do produce some very important works. They make our lives easier, and I stress this with certainly with litigants in person. You will find copies of these books in the courts, and so therefore, and it should be in public libraries as well, but they are used by the judges, and so therefore I do think this, bearing in mind how cheap these books are in comparison with things like the White Book and the Red Book and so forth, these books are actually extremely easy to get, and they're not difficult to read, because what the authors do and what LAG's basic aim and motivation has been all the way through is to make sure that people can try to understand in what are very complicated areas what their rights might be. Let me conclude, because it's only a short review I'm doing on this subject again. I think the book will be of particular assistance when it comes to the case summaries themselves, which are presented with a succinct headnote with a clear outline of the facts and a summary of the judgment, often with extensive citations. That's one of the reasons the book, of course, is so big. And it's not just, of course, a case book, though. That's, I think, the important point. It started off life as that, but it's become a bit more, because each chapter begins with a comprehensive overview of the legal framework of legislation and the latest guidance which is available. So all in all, I very much thank everybody involved. The hardback second edition, sorry, it's actually not a hardback, it's a paperback. I don't want to call it a hardback. It's a paperback. Was published on the 10th of July 2019, and it's also available as an ebook. Let's just have one last look at it. I don't know why I thought it was a hardback. It's certainly a paperback, but it's incredibly heavy. There we go. There's the front, there's the side, and then there's the back again. And it shows some contents at the bottom. You know, you've got all the usual stuff: consultation, public sector quality duties, assessments and so forth, local authorities and private providers and so on. It's a big area, it's a controversial area too, and an area where a lot of money is being spent. National Health Service provision, that's in the middle, because again, I'm in many families, I'm the same, have relatives who are in care, and therefore it's important to know where the interface is between the local authority, the NHS, and in my own case, private care arrangements. There's the book itself, as I say, just going back, human rights towards the end. You can see again, not too much footnoting. You can see the paragraph numbering, but again, the UN Charter, or rather the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is set out. And I think human rights are very important in this area, because I have to say, having seen some of the cases, and we do get them, inquiries about problems involving adult social care law, there can be quite serious problems that will arise, basically in the looking after, if I can put it that way, in this general picture, the looking after of people. And so I'm very grateful to this team, Stephen Knafler, Queen's Counsel, and everybody else, and the people at LAG. You make our lives a great deal easier with these books, and I think this book is helpful to a much wider range of people than just lawyers, because it's relatively easy to read. You should be able to find what you're looking for. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.